Now, Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, always glad to have you with us. And today we're going to be joined by someone who's been on the show a few times before, and that's because he's always up to something interesting, and his company is always going through growth spurts and doing new initiatives, and it's always an interesting conversation. So I want to welcome Angus Davis. He's the founder and CEO of Upserve. I apologize if I say Swipely. That was their former name. We're going to talk about why it changed, but he's the CEO of Upserve. Angus, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start off with, there will be people who maybe didn't know you as Swipely, don't know what you do at Upserve. So just elevator pitch, what do you guys do at Upserve?
Basically, we are the system that restaurants use, primarily full-service restaurants use to run their business. And so that can mean any number of different things. We have a point-of-sale system, which if you're at the restaurant, you see somebody entering your order in, that could be our technology. We also provide all the payment processing technology. And then we also give restaurants tools to help them better understand their customers, their menu items, and even the performance of their staff.
And that's one of the most interesting things. We're going to talk a bunch about that. Just to make it really clear to people, some of them are going to picture an old-fashioned cash register. I remember being a waiter back in the day, hitting the old buttons and everything. I'll age myself a little there. You do some of the stuff related to that. What's the difference between that old-fashioned version of the cash register and what you guys do?
Well, the big change is nowadays with the modern technology, people are moving to what's called the cloud, where basically the brains of the operation is up in the internet rather than being on the computer on site. And that enables you to access much more powerful technologies than you could in the past. Also, the other change that's happening with modern technology is people are adopting tools like iPads rather than proprietary hardware that's custom made. So all the kids know how to use an iPhone to check Facebook. Well, in a couple years when they show up to work in a restaurant and they're old enough to get a job, they can walk right up and use a system that isn't as arcane as those old-fashioned cash registers. It will feel very familiar to them because it's a lot like the way they would use their phone. It's that simple to be using an iPad-based point-of-sale system.
Some of this was pretty. A lot of this was very old-fashioned technology, right? You guys started up, I think, in '09. You really pivoted into this in the years after that. But
yes.
Still, a lot of restaurants seem to be using pretty much the same kind of stuff they've been using since the '80s for this kind of transaction.
Generally, when new technologies come out, it's the really big captains of industry type companies that first get the benefit of that new technology. And by the time the technology comes to small businesses, who are really the lifeblood of the American economy, oftentimes they've been left behind. And so many internet technology companies try to shy away from actually going after customers like restaurants because historically they're difficult to reach. There's so many, they're small businesses. It's not like you sign one big customer and you make your number.
Tight margins usually too, right, in restaurants?
Very tight margins in a restaurant. But we think it's the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. It's a great challenge, and what we can do is we can bring some of the technologies and tools that have helped big companies, and we can empower local small businesses like the restaurant you like to go to for date night with technologies that can help their business grow.
Now, as I mentioned, you changed the name. You were Swipely for a number of years. You changed it earlier this year to Upserve. What was the thinking there? Because it kind of says something about the company's transition.
Absolutely. Well, the name Swipely it kind of refers to credit card swiping, and we had a lot of technology relating to payments, and we still do. But 90% of our customers are restaurants, and there was nothing about our name that screamed, "We're for you, Mr. and Mrs. Restaurateur." And so we really wanted our name to reflect the customers that we serve and the products that we've been offering for several years now. And basically the rebranding or the changing of the name from Swipely to Upserve was a reflection of that.
So last time I checked in with you, you talked about a goal of doubling revenue in 2016. How is that going? How's the year been as a business?
It's going really well. We hit some speed bumps in early 2015, but we were able to shift up our strategy and the way we go to market, the way we sign up new customers, and that's been very successful. I think in the most recent month, in the month of July, we grew the business just over close to 6.5%, which is something like, that sounds like a small number, but I learned in math class you got to take it to the 12th power, so that's actually 111% annualized. So the business is growing at a very steady clip right now.
How is it did you hit a lot of low-hanging fruit at first on which restaurants were willing to do this, and now the selling is harder, or is it more like maybe word of mouth? The restaurateurs talk to each other, say, yeah, you got to get this computer in there.
I'd say it's harder in the beginning because restaurateurs are very much a believer in sort of references and talking with other people in the restaurateur community about which tools and technologies have worked out for them. Quite frankly, there's a lot of folks selling snake oil into small businesses, and when you're just starting out, you don't have a lot of reference customers, it's difficult. So I'd say it's gotten a little bit easier as time's gone on. We have a little bit more brand recognition, although it's still, not a very well-known brand yet. And so we have about 8,000 restaurants across the entire U.S. that are using our technology, and it's gotten better as time's gone on.
So I always find the analytics stuff really fascinating, which is a big part of what you present as in your offer to restaurants. About,
that's right.
You can slice and dice. I mean, this wine is often popular with this couple that comes back, or this pie is doing really well on Thursdays or whatever. What are the restaurants really using? That you roll out a lot of tools. What are they using the most? What do you find you get the most feedback about?
Sure, I'll give you a couple examples. One is just for the waiters and waitresses in the restaurant. And when you think about it, we don't think of it this way when we go to the restaurant, but to the restaurateur, that's almost like their sales force. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is interesting is you can look at how much has, say, Mary sold versus Margaret, for example, or Ralph. Mm-hmm. And what you find out is that perhaps Ralph is nowhere near as good as Mary when it comes to how much he sells. But why is that? It turns out that Mary and Ralph both sell the exact same amount of appetizers. They sell the exact same amount of entrees. But where Ralph really struggles is selling the wine. And you go up to Ralph and you say, well, Ralph, what's the issue with selling the wine? And he says, listen, Pinot Noir, Pinot Grigio, I don't know the difference. And then you can, as a manager, see that right away in the report. And then what you can immediately do is say, well, who's the best person on our team at selling the wine? Well, maybe that's actually Margaret is the #1 person selling the wine. And so you can have Ralph shadow her and learn more about how to position the wine list to the customers. That's an oversimplified example, but that's something we do just for the staff. And we can do similar things like that for your menu items. Like if you and I both went to the same restaurant, imagine if we went there 1,000 times and it took track of each item we ordered. We can actually show the restaurateur which items on their menu bring customers back. And when you have thousands of data points, or even like we do, actually billions of data points like that, we can give them really good insights on which items on their menu that they might want to promote and which ones, frankly, they might want to think about 86ing, which is restaurant lingo for taking it off the menu.
Getting it off the menu. Yeah. That's interesting. So what were restaurants using before? Was it just intuition? I mean, how were they deciding these kind of things?
One of the things about the restaurant world is they've got a lot of different systems, and those systems don't talk to each other. For example, your open table reservation system, that's the system a lot of restaurants use to take reservations. It doesn't actually talk to the point of sale system where the orders are going in. So I might have made 30 reservations at this restaurant, but they might not know that almost every time I come in, I like to have a glass of Pinot Grigio. And what we do at Upserve is we connect those dots. So the next time I actually make a reservation in the open table system, we'll tell the restaurateur that afternoon before I even come in, hey, he loves to get the Pinot Grigio. And then that way, when I come in, we often talk about trying to help the restaurateur make people feel like Norm walking into Cheers. And I'm dating myself because not all of the millennials on our team know about Norm and Cheers.
Yes, you had to have a few DVDs out there. I think. All right, we're going to take a break. We come back, we're going to talk more with Angus Davis about what's going on at Upserve and his thoughts on the future of the technology scene right here in Rhode Island. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we're joined today by someone who's appeared with us before to get an update on his Providence technology company, and that's Angus Davis. He's the founder and CEO of Upserve. Angus, you've had a couple interesting transactions in recent months. I want to touch on those a bit. So in May 2016, you made an acquisition. You purchased, they call it Breadcrumb, and it was part of Groupon. People might remember Groupon, the deals online. You could buy, 20 for 10, things like that. What was the thinking there? How did that fit in? Why did you decide this was something you wanted to bring into Upserve?
Sure. Well, for many years, Upserve is integrated with, that means sort of talk to the point of sale systems that restaurants actually use in their restaurants to enter in the orders and clock in and out employees. It's sort of the brain, the computer brain of the restaurant. And so we've talked to these other systems, but we noticed more and more of our customers were switching off of these old-fashioned systems to a newer iPad type system. And there's a few competitors in that space, but the one that we saw getting the most traction is this system called Breadcrumb. And it's really the leading iPad-based point of sale system that restaurants can use. So if you've been in the restaurant, you see something that looks back there a little bit like a space shuttle with the old-fashioned MS-DOS looking buttons and everything. But the newer restaurants that are opening up, they want to have modern technology, and that's the iPad. And so we saw an opportunity to not just talk to these third-party systems, but actually own one ourselves. And so we approached, we'd had a long-standing relationship with this company, and we were able to acquire the business from Groupon earlier this year. As a result of that, we now have offices in San Francisco and in Chicago, in addition to our office here in Providence.
You're all over the place. You must be flying a lot.
I racked up some miles.
Yeah, you got some miles going. So another one, this was interesting to me partly because their CEO was on our show a couple years ago, Square, the mobile payments company. People, if you buy something like on an iPad in a store, they're often going through Square. So you're going to partner with them on making loans, which I think is interesting. This came out August 2016, last month. How'd that come together?
Sure. Well, restaurants traditionally, like our typical customer, popping up a level, there's about 1 million restaurants in the U.S. They do about 800 billion in sales, which sounds like a lot, but that works out to less than $1 million on average per restaurant per year. Our customers are a little bit bigger than that, about $1.5 million per year in sales per location. But even so, that's still pretty small, and banks tend not to focus on that segment of the market. And so there's an opportunity created here because of the problem, which is they don't have the same access to capital that big companies do. So we looked for a partner that was able to provide loans to these types of small businesses. And Square has an initiative called Square Capital that's focused on this. And so it was a way for us to try out this capability of bringing access to capital to our customers without ourselves having to build out all the infrastructure to do that. So that's why we partnered with Square Capital.
Isn't it very, very risky to lend to restaurants? Because it just seems like such a tough business. You hear that from restaurateurs, how difficult it is. In some ways, I'm surprised they're able to make a big statement in the restaurants industry.
That's right. Well, one of the things that's different is that we're all used to things like our credit score and stuff like this. The beauty of how this program works is it doesn't look at those things. What it looks at is how's the health of the restaurant? What's the daily cash flow coming through the restaurant? Are people coming back? How many people came in? Are sales going through the roof? Are they kind of steady, or are they on the decline? Those are the data points that truly reflect the health of the business, and those are the data points that Upserve and our partner Square Capital are able to use as part of this program.
So you're spending a lot of time at restaurants with restaurateurs, with people who run these places, and you're a tech guy. You worked at Netscape a long time ago. Feels like a long time ago now, right?
Sure.
And I'm curious what you've learned about the restaurant business after you're like doing a seminar for yourself about how it works. I'm sure you talk to them a lot. What has stood out to you about that industry?
It's really the people behind it that stick out to me. It's an amazing industry. A lot of people don't realize this, but it's the second largest private sector employer in the U.S. after healthcare. 1 out of every 10 Americans in the workforce works in a restaurant. It's astounding.
Is that everything from McDonald's to Capital Grille? Or
It is, but you'd be surprised to know that 70% of all restaurants in the U.S. are single unit operations, and more than 95% have fewer than 4 locations. And so it really is the quintessential American dream, independent, small business type story, mom and pop type of situation. I mean, typically our customers might have anywhere from 10 to 50 employees, and they're facing a lot of challenges because, quite frankly, so much of the tech world and frankly many aspects of the economy are set up to cater to big companies, and they're being left behind. They don't have the same access to technology, in part because they don't have the capital budget to do it because it's a tight margin business. They might not have the technology sophistication, but most importantly, they just don't have the time. They're very busy running their restaurants. There's a lot of challenges on the restaurateur.
So how do you look at you just mentioned those other offices. People wonder, are they going to stay in Providence? Are they going to stay around? How do you look as you look longer term for the company? Do you still feel committed to growing it here?
For us, it's all about the talent. Every time we look to hire that next person on our team, we're open-minded about where that person can work. So if they want to work for us from our Providence office, that's great. If they want to work for us from our San Francisco office, that's great too. And so it's really, for us, it's about where can we find the talent. It's not about some of the things that a lot of times our politicians focus on, like tax incentives and things like that. Really, when you're in a high-growth technology company, it's all about where can you find the talent that's going to help your business grow. Because when you're growing at, anywhere from 3 to 7% in a single month, let alone, in a year, that's a remarkably challenging thing to do, and ultimately it comes down to the people in your company that are going to make it succeed.
We've talked about that talent issue for years on different shows, different interviews you and I have done, and I was surprised a little bit when GE Digital decided to put the office here, mostly because you always hear about the ongoing challenge of having enough trained tech workers here. Are you seeing improvement, or do you think that's more just a bet by them that they'll be able to find people somehow? What do you think's going on with that?
I think we're in a tight labor market across the U.S., and so I think it's smart of of large companies like GE to look outside the traditional sort of stereotypical technology centers, because if you've got a tight labor market nationwide, it's even tighter in places like New York City and San Francisco Bay Area. So I think they're smart to think about going into non-traditional places, and I also don't think it's a very expensive bet for them. So when you're the size of GE, what do you have to lose?
Very true, very true. So do you see, from your perspective, is it getting easier to find those people? Has it pretty much stayed the same throughout the time you've been running Swipely in Rhode Island?
I would say that for us, we're located in an unusual place. There aren't a lot of high-tech companies in Providence at our scale. And so what's gotten a little bit easier is that as we've grown the business, as we've become a larger player in our market, we've gained greater recognition. And so it's the type of business now that people are thinking about relocating to this area to join. For instance, just this month, we've hired a person from California, another person from Colorado, both of whom are relocating to the Northeast to join the company. I don't think that they would have necessarily made that leap a couple years ago when we weren't as established as we are today.
At the same time, you've been very realistic. We have to go to break, but I just want to put a cap on that about saying we've got to, you think, to have a sustainable tech ecosystem around, have more companies that are at least your size, if not bigger, to have that bench,
You need
right?
a company like 10 times the size. You need a company with sort of 1,000 plus, 1 to 2,000 Rhode Island-based employees. And that could be like the anchor tenant, if you will, in a mall, so to speak, that will, for many years, have a lasting impact, even after that company is gone. In many respects, Fairchild Semiconductor played that role in the dawn of Silicon Valley. They're not around anymore, but the aftershocks are still there.
Yeah, you still see the impact there. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about what's going on in the Rhode Island economy, as well as a recent boating accident that Angus helped bail them out on. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we're talking today with Angus Davis. He's the founder and CEO of Upserve, which is a Providence tech company. Been around about 100 plus people now, and they make the computer systems, they're I'm not summarizing well. They're doing computer systems for restaurants, so they're using those to track their sales and everything. It's really interesting. But I want to ask you some more general Rhode Island questions, because you follow public policy and life in Rhode Island closely if you're a lifelong Rhode Islander. I want to start off, we have had so much talk the last couple of years about economic development, making the economy work better in Rhode Island and everything. As you look at what makes headlines, what doesn't, what makes the agenda at the State House, what doesn't, what are the things you would like to see higher up, or are the things you think that are being worked on, you're like, yes, keep doing that? What's your first thought on that?
Well, the truth is I kind of stick to my knitting and run the business. The government isn't in a huge position to help us succeed or fail. We really just want to have an equal playing field. And so, it's things like, access to infrastructure, quality of life, it's the talent, it's the education system I've been involved with. Some of these are shorter term things that can be addressed by our policymakers, and others will take longer, like the education system. But at the end of the day, the biggest challenges that we face to our growth is really attracting the best talent to join our company. And so it's all the things that go into, will that person be there? Do they get the right education? Do they want to live here? Is it safe? Those types of things.
You've beaten the drum a bunch about, you see a big opportunity if we made the trains faster between Boston and Providence. You've talked about that a bunch. Do you get much pickup to people? You talk about in the Journal, you've talked about it with me. Do people reach out to you and maybe we should do that?
I do think that one of our greatest assets we have is that we're so close to the Boston economic market. There's a tremendous growth going on in Boston. All you have to do is drive up there. You see cranes in the sky, lots of jobs for people up there. Mm-hmm. So if we could we can't shorten the actual number of miles between us and Boston, but that train between Providence and Boston is a very powerful artery. It can both make it easier for people who live in Rhode Island to get to a great job in Boston, and it can make it easier for companies in Rhode Island to attract great talent that happens to live north of our state.
There's also, it's somewhat transportation related thing happening right near you, which is the situation in Kennedy Plaza. And your business is actually right down. You guys are on Dorrance Street, I believe.
We're literally on Kennedy Plaza. So our building is at the corner of Kennedy Plaza. For all the folks would know where Haven Brothers is. We're catty corner to Haven Brothers.
Nice, you can get a hot dog when you need it. So what's your take on the situation down there with the panhandling, some of the concerns around crime and everything, as a business owner, as someone bringing employees down there? What's your take on what's going on?
Well, it's a big challenge. We have close to 150 employees nationwide, and well over 100 are working out of our Kennedy Plaza office. And the parking structure that we use is on the north side of Kennedy Plaza, and our office is on the south side. So everybody that commutes to work by car is going through Kennedy Plaza every day. And what I've heard from our employees is they don't feel safe. And there have been incidents that have happened to our employees. For instance, the other day, there was somebody that actually followed one of our employees into the office. He was trying to heckle her and get her phone number, and he actually flashed a weapon at her to try to impress her.
Oh my God.
And another occasion, within the last couple months, we had somebody actually try to climb into a vehicle that one of our employees was getting into in the parking lot. And it's not an issue about homelessness, things like that. It's an issue about crime and safety. And we really need more attention from the mayor of Providence on this issue. I think that the work that Joe Paolino and some other community leaders have stepped up to do is very important. But I really think that we have a challenge with the mayor. I'm not convinced that Mayor Lorza is focused on this to the degree he ought to be. It's at the center of the city, and if we want to attract companies and we want to attract quality, residential and arts and all the things we want to have in the center of the Renaissance city, so to speak, then we need to have a safe environment.
Now, I got to ask you about this boat incident. So I saw this in, Tim White saw it actually in the East Bay paper, that some guys, I don't know if they capsized, I'll let you tell the story, and you heard him and you went out and helped them. What happened?
Our family, our three boys, my wife Joanna and I, we live in the summertime in Bristol near the water, and it was after dark, and the kids were going to bed a little late. I don't know, maybe 8:30 or something. And Joanna said, "You got to come out here. I hear something on the water." And so we got a flashlight, and there was actually two gentlemen clinging to the bow of a sunken boat about 50 or 100 yards offshore. And it was a pretty scary experience, but thankfully, I was able to get out there, and the Bristol Fire Department showed up right on time. And it's an all-volunteer.
I was going to say, they're volunteers in Bristol, right?
Yeah, all-volunteer fire department, and they're just a remarkable group of folks, and made me very proud. I grew up in Bristol, so I was proud to be a Bristolian that night.
And those guys are all right?
Everybody walked away okay. I think the only damage was to the ego, and the boat is, I think, a total loss.
A total loss. Oof, that's a little rough for them. They'll have to figure that one out. I got to ask you this, because we're talking a bit about public policy, about what's going on in the city and stuff. You served on the education board. You've been outspoken on education particularly. I know you care a lot about that. When I said you're coming on, two people said to me, ask him if he's going to run for office. Have you ever thought about that? Would you ever run for office in Rhode Island?
I care deeply about Rhode Island, and I think that many of the things that are challenges for our state are things that we could change at the policy level and have a really positive impact in the lives of Rhode Islanders. I wouldn't rule anything out, but I've found that the best way I can be helpful right now is trying to grow this business. And politicians talk about creating jobs. I feel like we're actually doing something about that over there. So I'll stick to that. I'll stick to business, which is I think what I know best. But I've been very supportive of some political efforts, and will continue to try to stay engaged on public policy issues. I love Rhode Island, and I would love for it to be a better place to live and work.
All right, well, you heard it. If he is going to announce something, I'm sure you'll do it here on Executive Suite, right, Angus?
Absolutely,
Where
Ted.
else?
Where
right?
else?
All right, thank you, Angus Davis, founder and CEO of Upserve. Appreciate you being here with us. And thank you for joining us for this conversation. Remember, you can catch every episode of Executive Suite on our website, WPRI.com, and you can also sign up to download it as a podcast on iTunes. See you back here next week on Executive Suite.